Episode 1, Echoes of Thornwick. The sun dips below the horizon, casting a warm glow of amber and crimson across the sprawling expanse of blackthorn wood, its light filtering through the dense canopy of ancient oaks and pines. A gentle breeze weaves through the towering trees, carrying the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and the faint, acrid tang of smoke from distant fires, a reminder of the chaos that has plagued the region. The leaves rustle softly overhead, their edges tinged with the first hints of autumn's chill, some already falling in lazy spirals to the forest floor, where they crunch underfoot on a narrow dirt path. This path, worn smooth by countless travelers, cuts through the undergrowth like a scar, its surface rutted by cartwheels and stained with the mud of hurried footsteps. It leads to the small village of Thornwick, nestled at the forest's edge, a fragile bastion of civilization in a land increasingly shadowed by fear. Thornwick is a humble settlement, its thatched roof cottages huddled together as if seeking comfort in their proximity, their timber walls weathered by time and the elements, some sagging under the weight of years. A low wooden palisade encircles the village, its stakes uneven and splintered, offering little defense against the dangers lurking beyond, more a symbol of hope than a true barrier. Smoke drifts lazily from chimneys, curling into the twilight sky like ghostly fingers, and the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoes through the air, a rhythmic heartbeat that speaks of resilience despite the growing dread. The murmur of villagers tending to their evening chores, chopping firewood, drawing water from a creaking well, or herding a few scrawny goats into a pen, mingles with the occasional sob or whispered prayer. The villagers move with hurried steps, their faces drawn and pale, their eyes darting toward the darkening forest as if expecting monsters to emerge at any moment. Recent raids by Gorsnak, the Rift Weaver, and his band of orcs have left Thornwick reeling, the once lively village now a place of hushed voices and locked doors. Just last week, the orcs stole half the village's grain stores, leaving families to ration their meager supplies. And 3 days ago, they took Joran's son, a boy of only 10, dragging him screaming to the night. The villagers' fear is palpable, a heavy weight that presses down on every soul, their hope dwindling with each passing day. At the heart of Thornwick stands the Rusty Tankard, a dimly lit tavern that serves as the village's only gathering place, its weathered sign swinging creakily in the breeze, the painted tankard on it faded to a ghostly outline. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of stale ale, roasted meat, and the faint musk of unwashed bodies, the atmosphere heavy with tension. The wooden tables are scratched and worn, their surfaces sticky with spilled drinks, and the chairs creak under the weight of the few patrons who sit hunched over their mugs, their conversations quiet and tense, their eyes darting toward the door with every creak of the floorboards. A fire crackles in the hearth, its flickering light casting long shadows across the room, illuminating the faces of the villagers, men and women with hollow cheeks and weary eyes, their hands trembling as they grip their mugs, seeking solace in the bitter ale. In the corner, a figure with crimson skin and curved horns strums a worn lute, their presence a subtle note in the tavern's gloom, their melody a haunting undertone that blends with the crackle of the fire. The tavern door creaks open, the sound sharp and jarring in the quiet room, and Aramis Matus steps inside, his cloak pulled tight to conceal his face, the hem brushing the floor with a soft rustle. His eyes, sharp and guarded, scan the room with a quiet intensity, taking in every detail, the huddled villagers, the flickering lamps, the figure in the corner, the faint scent of fear that clings to the air. Aramis harbors a heavy secret, one he guards with every step, though to the onlookers he's simply a reserved traveler with a shadowed past. In one hand, he grips a gnarled staff, its wood etched with faint, swirling patterns that catch the dim light of the tavern, marking him as a mage to those who know the signs. The staff is a sturdy piece, its surface worn smooth by years of use, its head capped with a small, polished amber stone that glimmers faintly with an inner light, a subtle hint of the power it channels. A dagger hangs at his belt, its hilt simple but well-worn, a common tool for mages who might need to defend themselves up close, its blade hidden beneath a leather sheath. At his side, a cloaked figure, Ubin Maedis, introduced as his brother, stands silently. Covered head to toe in tattered rags, a rusty longsword at his side, staying close to Aramis. The villagers glance at Ubin with pity, whispering about the poor leper, their voices tinged with a mix of sympathy and unease. But Aramis's protective stance keeps them at a distance, his eyes daring anyone to come closer. Beneath the rags, Ubin's true nature remains hidden, his movements stiff but deliberate, a secret that Aramis guards with his life. Aramis's gaze falls on a notice pinned to the wall, scrawled in hasty script on a piece of weathered parchment. Heroes wanted. Stop the orc raids. Reward 50 gold. He steps forward, his cloak rustling softly, and tears it down with a swift motion, his jaw set with determination, his fingers tightening around the staff as he reads the words. His mind races, calculating how this quest might serve his own hidden goals. He turns to Ubin, his voice a low whisper, barely audible over the crackle of the fire. "This could be our chance," he murmurs, his tone cold and measured. Ubin nods slightly, his rag-covered head dipping, his silence a stark contrast to the tension in Aramis's frame. Draug Colvin enters next, the door swinging open with a groan, his longbow slung across his back, a quiver of arrows with a crimson fletching at his side. His weathered face is set in a stern expression, his stone-gray eyes scanning the tavern for any sign of danger, his stance taut with the burden of constant vigilance. He's a broad-shouldered wood elf, his leather armor creaking softly as he moves, the scars on his hands a testament to years of survival in the wild. His dark brown hair is tied back in a loose braid, streaked with strands of gray that hint at his age, though his movements are as sharp as a younger man's, each step deliberate and silent. There's a hardness to Draug, a quiet intensity that speaks of a past filled with loss, though he keeps his history to himself. His gaze flicks to a beetle crawling across the floor, its tiny legs skittering over the worn planks, and with a sudden, deliberate motion, he stomps it into the ground, his expression darkening with a visceral disgust. He mutters under his breath, "Filthy bugs." The words laced with a hatred that seems personal, though the reason remains a mystery, a story he's not yet ready to share. Draug has come to Thornwick seeking work, drawn by rumors of the village's troubles, hoping to find a purpose in protecting others and seeking revenge. Bartholomew Battlequack, strong-arm, strides in last, the door banging against the wall with a loud thud, a towering presence, his human frame warped into a duckish oddity. A broad beak gleams yellow in the firelight. Webbed feet slap the ground with dull thuds, and chainmail rattles over muscled shoulders, feathers, white and brown, streaked with grime, ruffling in the draft from the open door. He grips war hammers in each hand, their heads notched and stained with the blood of past foes, black eyes darting with restless energy across the huddled villagers. He calls himself Battlequack, a name that suits his bizarre appearance, though his past is a fog he can't pierce. He embraces his form, driven by a love for battle, whiskey, and the thrill of the fight. His past a blank slate he doesn't dwell on. He takes a gulp from his flask, the harsh bite of cheap whiskey warming his throat. and lets out a hearty quack that resonates through the tavern, drawing startled glances from the villagers. "What are you lot staring at?" he barks, his voice a gravelly rasp, before slamming his flask on the nearest table and grinning, his beak parting to reveal a row of jagged teeth. "Ain't seen a warrior like me before, eh? Well, you're in for a treat." He laughs, a booming sound that fills the room, though the villagers' expressions remain wary, their hands tightening around their mugs. The three, Aramis with Ubin, Drag, and Battlequack, find themselves drawn together by the notice Aramis holds, their paths converging as if by fate, each driven by their own motives, yet united by the promise of coin and the chance to strike a blow against Gorsnak's band. Aramis steps toward the center of the room, the notice still clutched in his hand, his cloak casting a long shadow across the floor. Draug follows, his movements silent, his eyes flicking between Aramis and the other patrons, assessing the situation with a hunter's instinct. Battlequack lumbers over, his chainmail clinking with each step, his war hammers swinging lazily at his sides, a grin still plastered across his beak. "So you're the one with the job," Battlequack says, his tone brash, his black eyes fixed on Aramis. "What's the plan, Clokey?" "I'm itching for a fight." Aramis turns to face him, his expression unreadable beneath the hood of his cloak, though his eyes narrow slightly at Battlequack's tone. "The plan," he says, his voice low and measured, each word carefully chosen, "is to find the orcs and end their raids. But we'll need to work together." He glances at Draug, noting the ranger's tense posture, the way his hand hovers near his quiver. "You're a hunter," Aramis continues, his tone matter-of-fact. "You can track them, yes?" Draug nods, his jaw tight, his eyes meeting Aramis's with a flicker of respect, though his suspicion remains. "I can track anything that leaves a trail," Draug replies, his voice clipped, his fingers brushing the fletching of an arrow. "Orcs aren't subtle. They'll have left signs." Battlequack lets out a booming quack, slamming one of his war hammers on the table with a thud that makes the mugs rattle, ale sloshing over the rims. "Tracking, planning, bah! Just point me at 'em, and I'll crack their skulls," he roars, his black eyes gleaming with anticipation. "I've got a thirst for orc blood that whiskey won't quench." Aramis's lips press into a thin line, his patience tested by Battlequack's recklessness. But he says nothing, his mind already calculating the dynamics of this unlikely group. Draug, however, shoots Battlequack a sharp look, his hand tightening on his bow. "Recklessness gets you killed," he says, his tone cold, his eyes boring into the duck-like warrior. "We do this my way, quietly, until we know what we're dealing with." Battlequack snorts, his beak twitching, but he doesn't argue, though the tension between them crackles like the fire in the hearth. At the center of the tavern, Eldrin, the village elder, a wiry man with a gray beard and tired eyes, stands with his hands clasped tightly around a wooden staff, addressing the small crowd of villagers. His face is lined with worry, his shoulders stooped under the weight of his responsibility, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve as he speaks. "We can't go on like this," he says, his words cutting through the murmur of the crowd, drawing the attention of the newcomers. "Gorsnak's orcs have taken too much, our grain, our livestock, and now Joran's boy. They came 3 nights ago under the cover of darkness, their torches blazing like demons' eyes. They tore through the village, smashing doors, dragging Torin from his bed, while Joran fought to hold them off. We need help, or Thornwick won't survive the winter." The villagers murmur in agreement, their eyes darting nervously as if expecting an attack at any moment. Some clutching at talismans or whispering prayers to forgotten gods. A woman in the corner, her face streaked with tears, lets out a choked sob, her hands wringing a tattered shawl. "My Torin," she whispers, her voice breaking. He's all I have left." Eldrin's gaze falls on the newcomers, a flicker of hope in his expression as he steps forward to greet them, his staff tapping against the floor with each step. "You there," he calls, his voice carrying over the crowd, though it wavers with exhaustion. "You look like you can handle yourselves. We need warriors to drive off Gorsnak's band and bring back Joran's son, Torin. The reward is 50 gold. More if you can end this threat. Good." He pauses, his eyes searching their faces, lingering on Aramis's cloaked form, Drav's stern expression, and Battlequack's towering feathered frame. "Please," he adds, his voice softer now, almost a plea. We're at our breaking point. Aramis steps forward, the notice still clutched in his hand, his expression unreadable beneath the hood of his cloak, though his eyes gleam with a calculating intensity. "We'll take the job," he says, his voice low and measured, each word carrying a weight that silences the room. "But we'll need more information. Where were the orcs last seen?" Eldrin nods, relief washing over his weathered face, though his hands still tremble as he grips his staff. "They've been raiding from an abandoned quarry a few miles east of here," he replies, pointing a trembling finger toward the door. "Joran saw them drag Torin toward the quarry just yesterday. He tried to follow, but they beat him back, left him bloodied in the dirt. But be warned, Gorsnak is no ordinary orc. They say he's a shaman, one who tears open portals to summon foul creatures. You'll need to be careful." Draug's eyes narrow at the mention of the quarry, his hand instinctively brushing the fletching of an arrow in his quiver, his mind already mapping out the terrain. "A quarry's a good place for an ambush," he says, his tone clipped, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "We'll need to scout it first, hit them before they can summon anything. If this Gorsnak can call up creatures, we can't let him get the upper hand." Battlequack lets out a booming quack, slamming one of his war hammers on the table again, the wood groaning under the impact. "Scout, fight, whatever. Just point me at 'em," he roars, his black eyes gleaming with anticipation. "I'll smash 'em before they can blink." Aramis glances at his companions, his expression still guarded, but a flicker of approval crosses his face at Draug's caution, though he remains wary of Battlequack's impulsiveness. "Then we move at first light," he says, his voice firm, brooking no argument. "We'll need the daylight to spot their traps." The night passes uneasily in Thornwick, the party resting in the tavern's cramped upstairs rooms, the creak of the floorboards, and the howl of the wind outside keeping them on edge. Aramis sits by the window, his staff across his lap, his eyes fixed on the darkened forest beyond, his thoughts a tangled web of plans and secrets. He fingers the amulet around his neck, its surface cold against his skin, a reminder of the power he wields and the price he's paid to protect Ubin. Ubin stands motionless in the corner, his rag-covered form a silent sentinel, his true nature hidden from the others, though Aramis can feel the weight of his presence, a constant reminder of his past. Draug lies on his bedroll, his bow within arm's reach, his eyes staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying memories of his village's destruction at the hands of the Thri-Kreen, the skittering of their insectoid legs haunting his dreams. Battlequack, meanwhile, sprawls across 2 chairs, his flask in hand, snoring loudly between gulps of whiskey, his war hammers propped against the wall, their notched heads gleaming in the moonlight that filters through the cracked window. At dawn, the party gathers their gear and sets out, the village waking around them with a quiet, fearful energy. The villagers watch from their doorways, their faces pale, some offering whispered blessings as the group passes, their hands clutching at talismans or scraps of cloth. The woman from the tavern, Joran's wife Mara, steps forward, her eyes red-rimmed, her shawl clutched tightly around her shoulders. "Please," she says, her voice trembling, her hands reaching out as if to touch Aramis's cloak, but stopping short. "Bring my Tauren back. He's all I have." Aramis meets her gaze, his expression unreadable, but he nods once, a silent promise, before turning away, his cloak billowing behind him as he leads the group toward the eastern path. The journey through Blackthorn Wood is tense, the trees growing denser as they move deeper into the forest, their branches forming a canopy that blocks out much of the morning light, casting dappled shadows across the path. The air grows colder, the scent of pine giving way to the faint tang of iron and decay, a sign of the orcs' presence, their raids leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The party moves in silence, their footsteps muffled by the carpet of fallen leaves, though Battlequack's heavy tread and occasional muttered curses break the stillness, earning him a sharp glance from Drow. "Keep it down," Drow hisses, his voice low, his hand on his bow. "You'll bring the whole forest down on us." Battlequack snorts, his beak twitching, but he lowers his voice, though his webbed feet still slap against the ground with each step. Halfway to the quarry, the party encounters a sign of the orcs' cruelty. A merchant's cart lies overturned on the side of the path, its wheels shattered, its contents spilled across the dirt. Sacks of grain have been torn open, their contents scattered, and a trail of blood leads into the undergrowth, where the merchant's body lies, his throat slit, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. Draug kneels beside the body, his fingers brushing the ground, reading the signs with a hunter's skill. "Orcs did this," he says, his voice grim, his eyes narrowing as he points to a set of heavy boot prints leading east. "Not long ago, maybe a day. They're heading toward the quarry." Aramis examines the cart, his eyes scanning for anything of value, but finds only a broken lantern and a few copper coins, 5 in total, which he pockets without a word, his mind already turning to the possibility of artifacts in the quarry. As they continue, the forest grows darker, the trees more twisted, their branches gnarled and bare, as if the orc's presence has poisoned the land itself. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth puts the party on edge, and Draug raises a hand, signaling them to stop, his bow already drawn. A low growl echoes through the trees, and a massive wolf emerges from the shadows, its fur matted with blood, its yellow eyes glinting with hunger. The beast, likely driven mad by the orc's disruption of its territory, lunges at the party, its jaws snapping, a snarl ripping from its throat. Draug reacts first, loosing an arrow that catches the wolf in the shoulder, the beast yelping as it stumbles. But it doesn't stop, its claws tearing into the dirt as it charges toward Ubin. Ubin steps forward, his movements stiff but precise, his rusty longsword flashing as he swings, the blade biting into the wolf's flank, drawing a spray of blood. The wolf howls, turning to snap at Ubin, but Battlequack charges in, his war hammers swinging in a deadly arc, one hammer slamming into the wolf's skull with a sickening crunch, the beast collapsing in a heap, its body twitching once before going still. "That's more like it," Battlequack quacks, his voice booming, his black eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he wipes the blood from his hammer, the crimson staining his feathers. Draug kneels beside the wolf, his expression grim, his fingers brushing the arrow in its shoulder. "The orcs are driving the wildlife mad," he says, his voice low, his eyes darkening with anger. "They're a blight on this land." Aramis nods, his expression unreadable, but his mind races. This chaos could provide cover for his search for cursed items to strengthen Ubin. The quarry comes into view as the sun climbs higher in the sky, its jagged outline a stark contrast against the muted greens and browns of Blackthorn Wood. The quarry is a gaping wound in the earth, its walls of gray stone streaked with moss and lichen, the remnants of a once thriving operation now abandoned to time and neglect. Rusted tools lie scattered across the ground, their handles splintered, their blades dulled by years of exposure to the elements. Overturned carts, their wheels broken or missing, sit half buried in the dirt, their wooden frames rotting away, while piles of cracked stone blocks hint at the labor that once filled this place with the clamor of industry. A faint mist clings to the quarry's depths, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and decay, and the distant caw of a crow echoes through the stillness, a mournful sound that sends a shiver down Drav's spine. At the quarry's edge, a crude camp has been set up, a haphazard collection of tattered tents, and a smoldering fire pit, the embers glowing faintly in the morning light, casting a dim orange glow across the ground. The tents are made of patched hides, their surfaces stained with dirt and blood, and crude wooden stakes driven into the earth hold them in place, their tips sharpened to a point. A pile of bones, some animal, some disturbingly human, lies near the fire pit. The remnants of the orc's meals, the marrow sucked dry, the bones cracked and splintered. A few rusted weapons, mostly axes and daggers, are propped against a nearby rock, their blades notched and stained, a testament to the violence that has taken root here. The camp is eerily quiet. The only sound, the faint crackle of the dying fire and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. But the air is thick with the promise of danger, a tension that sets the party on edge. Draug takes the lead, his steps silent as he scouts the perimeter, his sharp eyes scanning for signs of movement, his bow held at the ready, an arrow already nocked. He moves with the grace of a predator, his leather armor blending into the shadows of the quarry's edge, his braids swaying slightly with each step. He raises a hand, signaling the others to stop, and points to a lone orc scout patrolling the camp's edge, a hulking figure with greenish-gray skin, clad in patchwork leather armor, a crude axe slung across its back. The orc's tusks jut from its lower jaw, yellowed and cracked, and its beady eyes glint with a dull malice as it sniffs the air, its head turning slowly as if sensing something amiss. "One guard," Draug whispers, his voice barely audible, his eyes narrowing as he assesses the distance. "I can take him quietly." Aramis nods, his grip tightening on his staff, the amber stone at its tip, glinting faintly in the sunlight, while Battlequack shifts impatiently, his webbed feet scuffing the dirt, his war hammers twitching in his hands. "Make it quick," Battlequack mutters, his voice a low growl, his eyes fixed on the orc with a predatory gleam. Draug draws his bow, the string taut, the crimson fletching of his arrow a stark contrast against the muted colors of the forest. He takes a slow, steady breath, his movements precise, and releases the arrow with a soft twang that cuts through the silence. The arrow flies true, a blur of motion, and strikes the orc in the throat, the point piercing through its leathery skin with a wet thud. The orc lets out a choked gurgle, its hands clawing at its neck as blood spurts from the wound, staining the ground a dark crimson. It stumbles forward, its axe slipping from its grasp, and collapses into the dirt, its body twitching once before going still, its eyes staring blankly at the sky. The kill is clean, silent, and the camp remains undisturbed, the other orcs, if there are any, unaware of the danger that has just descended upon them. The party moves into the camp, their movements cautious but swift, their senses heightened as they search for clues about Torin's whereabouts. Aramis examines the tents, his eyes scanning for anything of value, but the tents are filled with little more than scraps of food, broken weapons, and the stench of unwashed bodies. He lifts a tattered flap, peering inside, and finds a small wooden crate, its lid splintered, containing a few moldy loaves of bread and a rusted dagger, its blade too dull to be of use. He pockets the dagger anyway, in his mind already considering its potential, though he knows it's nothing special. Ubin stays close, his rag-covered form silent, his rusty longsword at the ready, his head turning slowly as if scanning for threats, his movements stiff and deliberate. Draug moves to the fire pit, his fingers brushing the ashes, testing their warmth. "They were here recently," he says, his voice low, his eyes flicking to the pile of bones nearby. "These bones, some are fresh. They've been eating well." Battlequack, meanwhile, prowls the camp's perimeter, his war hammers swinging lazily at his side, his black eyes darting from shadow to shadow, eager for a fight. He kicks over a pile of debris, sending a rusted helmet skittering across the ground, and lets out a disappointed quack. "Where's the action?" he grumbles, his voice loud enough to make Draug wince, his hand tightening on his bow. "Keep your voice down," Draug hisses, his tone sharp, his eyes flashing with irritation. "You'll get your fight soon enough." Battlequack snorts, his beak twitching, but he lowers his voice, though his impatience is palpable, his webbed feet shifting restlessly in the dirt. Aramis's attention is drawn to a small, makeshift shrine at the edge of the camp. A crude structure of stacked stones topped with a skull, human by the look of it, its eye sockets empty, its jaw hanging open in the silent scream. A faint, sickly green glow emanates from the skull, a sign of dark magic. And Aramis's eyes narrow as he approaches, his staff held at the ready. The glow is faint, barely noticeable, but it sends a chill down his spine. He kneels beside the shrine, his fingers brushing the stones, and feels a faint pulse of energy, a whisper of death. "This is Gorsnak's work," he murmurs, his voice low, his mind racing with possibilities. The shrine is a marker, a sign of the shaman's presence, and Aramis knows it could lead to something of power or danger. He considers taking the skull, but decides against it, not wanting to draw the party's attention to his interest in such things, at least not yet. Before he can investigate further, a guttural roar echoes from the quarry's depths, the sound reverberating off the stone walls, sending a flock of crows scattering into the sky with a chorus of harsh caws. The party freezes, their weapons drawn, their senses on high alert, as the sound of heavy footsteps approaches. 3 goblins emerge from a nearby tent, their beady eyes glinting with malice, their jagged daggers drawn, their movements quick and skittering, like rats emerging from a sewer. The goblins are small, their skin a mottled green, their ears pointed and twitching, their mouths filled with sharp, yellowed teeth. Behind them, another orc charges forward, this one larger than the scout, its tusks yellowed and cracked, a heavy mace in its hands, its leather armor creaking as it moves, its eyes burning with a savage fury. Battlequack reacts first, charging at the orc with a bellowing quack that echoes through the quarry, his warhammer swinging in a deadly arc, his chainmail rattling with each step. The orc swings its mace, the heavy iron head whistling through the air, but Battlequack ducks under the blow, his feathers ruffling, and slams one hammer into the orc's knee, eliciting a howl of pain as the bone cracks with a sickening snap. The orc stumbles, its mace falling from its grasp, and Battlequack follows up with a second blow, his other hammer smashing into the orc's chest, the impact sending it to the ground, blood bubbling from its mouth as it gasps for air. "That's one down," Battlequack roars, his voice triumphant, his black eyes gleaming with bloodlust, as he turns to face the goblins, his hammers dripping with crimson. Draug looses an arrow, the crimson fletching a blur as it flies through the air, catching one of the goblins in the chest, the creature squealing as it falls, its dagger clattering to the ground, its body twitching in the dirt. The other 2 goblins rush toward Aramis and Ubin, their daggers raised, their high-pitched screeches filling the air with a grating cacophony. Aramis raises his staff, the amber stone at its tip glowing with a faint, sickly light as a dark energy gathers around him, the air growing cold and heavy. He unleashes a wave of shadowy force, a rippling blast of dark energy that slams into one goblin, its body writhing as the energy saps its strength, its skin turning pale and ashen as it gasps for breath. Ubin steps forward, his movement stiff but precise, his rusty longsword flashing in the sunlight as he drives it into the second goblin's gut, the blade piercing through its tattered armor with a sickening crunch. The creature's screeches cut short as it collapses, its blood pooling in the dirt. The remaining goblin, seeing its companions fall, turns to flee, its tiny legs pumping as it scrambles toward the quarry's depths, its dagger abandoned in its panic. Drow's arrow catches it in the back, the point piercing through its spine, pinning it to the ground with a wet thud, its body going limp as its lifeblood seeps into the earth. The camp falls silent, the only sound the crackle of the dying fire and the party's heavy breathing, their weapons still raised, their eyes scanning for more threats. Battlequack wipes the blood from his hammers, a grin spreading across his beak as he surveys the carnage, his feathers stained with crimson. "That's more like it," he quacks, his voice booming, his black eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "But where's the rest of 'em? I'm just getting started." Draug kneels beside the fallen orc, his fingers brushing the ground, reading the signs with a hunter's skill. "They've been here," he says, his voice grim, his gray eyes narrowing, as he points to a set of tracks leading deeper into the quarry. More tracks, goblins and orcs heading that way. But the boy isn't here. Aramis searches the orc's body, his hands moving quickly, his eyes scanning for anything of value. He finds a small pouch containing 10 copper coins, which he pockets, and a tattered map fragment, marked with a broken claw symbol and a crude drawing of a cave in the ashen wastes, west of Blackthorn Wood. The map is stained with blood, its edges frayed, but the symbol is clear, a sign of Gorsnak's presence, and Aramis's mind races with possibilities. This could lead to artifacts or even a powerful relic he's heard whispers of. "We've got a lead," Aramis says, folding the map and tucking it into his cloak, his voice low and measured, though a flicker of anticipation crosses his face. "But Torrin isn't here. They must have taken him to the wastes." Draug nods, his face grim, his eyes darkening with resolve. "The ashen wastes are no place for a child," he says, his voice low, his hand tightening on his bow. "We need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the less chance he has." Battlequack wipes the blood from his hammers, a grin spreading across his beak, his black eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Let's go crack some more skulls," he quacks, his voice booming, his webbed feet shifting restlessly into the dirt. "I'm ready for round 2. Before they leave, Aramis takes a moment to examine the shrine more closely, his fingers brushing the skull, the faint green glow pulsing beneath his touch. He feels a surge of necrotic energy, a whisper of death that resonates with the amulet around his neck, and for a moment he hears a faint voice in his mind, a rasping whisper that speaks in an ancient tongue, its words unintelligible but filled with malice. He pulls his hand back, his heart racing, his mind racing with questions. What is this shrine, and what power does it hold? He decides to leave it for now, not wanting to draw the party's attention to his interest, but he makes a mental note to return to the wastes, where such power might be more fully explored. The party gathers their gear and prepares to leave the quarry, their path now leading toward the desolate expanse of the ashen wastes, where greater dangers and secrets await. But before they can depart, Draug raises a hand, his sharp eyes catching a faint movement in the quarry's depths, a shadow that doesn't belong. "We're not alone," he whispers, his voice tense, his bow already drawn, an arrow nocked and ready. The party turns, their weapons raised, as a low growl echoes through the quarry, the sound sending a chill down their spines. From the shadows of the quarry's lower levels, a pack of 3 feral wolves emerges, their fur matted with blood and dirt, their yellow eyes glinting with hunger, their lips curled back to reveal jagged teeth. The wolves are larger than the one they encountered in the forest, their bodies lean but muscular, their movements coordinated as they fan out, circling the party with a predator's instinct. The orc's presence has driven the local wildlife into a frenzy, and these wolves, starved and desperate, see the party as their next meal. The largest of the pack, a scarred alpha with a missing ear, lets out a bone-chilling howl, the sound reverberating off the quarry walls, and the other 2 wolves join in, their howls a haunting chorus that fills the air with dread. Draug looses an arrow at the alpha, the crimson fletching a blur as it flies through the air, striking the wolf in the shoulder, the beast yelping as it stumbles. But it doesn't stop, its claws tearing into the dirt as it charges toward him, its jaws snapping. Battlequack charges at the second wolf, his war hammers swinging in a deadly arc, his chainmail rattling with each step, his voice booming with a battle cry that echoes through the quarry. "Come on, you mangy mutts!" he roars, his black eyes gleaming with bloodlust, his feathers ruffling as he slams one hammer into the wolf's side, the impact sending it sprawling, its ribs cracking with a sickening snap. The wolf howls in pain, its body twitching in the dirt. But Battlequack doesn't stop, his other hammer coming down on its skull, crushing it with a wet thud, blood and bone splattering across the ground. Aramis and Ubin face the third wolf, the beast lunging at Ubin with a snarl, its teeth bared, its claws slashing at the air. Ubin steps forward, his movements stiff but precise, his rusty longsword flashing as he swings, the blade biting into the wolf's flank, drawing a spray of blood that stains his tattered rags. The wolf howls, turning to snap at Ubin, its teeth grazing his arm, but the rags hold, concealing his true nature, and Ubin feels no pain. Aramis raises his staff, the amber stone glowing with a faint, sickly light, as he unleashes another wave of shadowy force, slamming into the wolf and sending it tumbling, its body writhing, its fur turning ashen as it gasps for breath. Draug, meanwhile, grapples with the alpha, the wolf's jaws snapping inches from his face as he wrestles it to the ground, his bow abandoned in the dirt, his hands gripping its throat as he tries to keep its teeth at bay. The wolf's claws rake across his leather armor, leaving deep scratches, but Draug holds firm, his eyes burning with determination, his muscles straining as he fights to overpower the beast. Battlequack, having finished off the second wolf, charges over to help, his war hammer swinging, and slams one hammer into the alpha's side, the impact sending it toppling, its body rolling across the ground, blood streaming from its wounds. Draug scrambles to his feet, grabbing his bow, and looses an arrow at point-blank range, the point piercing through the alpha's eye, the beast letting out a final, pitiful whimper before collapsing, its body going still. The quarry falls silent once more. The only sound the party's heavy breathing and the distant caw of a crow, the air thick with the scent of blood and death. Draug retrieves his arrows, his hands steady despite the scratches on his armor, his eyes scanning the quarry for more threats, his jaw tight with tension. Battlequack wipes the blood from his hammers, a grin spreading across his beak, his black eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "That's more like it," he quacks, his voice booming, his feathers stained with crimson. "But I'm still itching for more." Aramis examines the wolves' bodies, noting the signs of starvation and rage, his mind turning to the orc's impact on the land. Though his thoughts are more practical, there's nothing of value. "We need to get back to Thornwick," Draug says, his voice low, his eyes darkening with resolve as he slings his bow across his back. "We need to report to Eldrin, let him know what we found." Aramis nods, his expression unreadable, but his mind races. The map fragment is a lead, possibly to something powerful. "Agreed," he says, his voice low and measured, his cloak rustling as he turns to lead the group back to the village. "But we move quickly. The wastes won't wait." The journey back to Thornwick is swift, the party moving with purpose, their steps quickened by the urgency of their mission. The forest seems to close in around them, the trees more twisted, the air colder, as if the land itself senses the darkness that lies ahead. They reach the village as the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the dirt path. The villagers emerging from their homes to watch their return, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Eldrin meets them at the edge of the village, his staff tapping against the ground, his gray beard trembling as he steps forward, his tired eyes searching their faces for news. "You're back," Eldrin says, his voice trembling with a mix of relief and dread, his hands tightening around his staff. "Did you find Torin? Is he—" Aramis steps forward, the map fragment still clutched in his hand, his expression unreadable beneath the hood of his cloak. "He wasn't at the quarry," he says, his voice low and measured, each word carefully chosen. "But we found this." He holds up the map fragment, the broken claw symbol stark against the blood-stained parchment, and Eldrin's eyes widen, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "The ashen wastes," Eldrin murmurs, his voice barely audible, his hands trembling as he takes the map. "That's where they've taken him. But the wastes, they're a cursed place, filled with death and worse. You'll need to be careful." Draug nods, his face grim, his eyes darkening with resolve. "We'll find him," he says, his voice low, his hand tightening on his bow. "We'll bring him back." Battlequack lets out a booming quack, his war hammers swinging lazily at his sides, his black eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Let's go crack some more skulls," he says, his voice booming, his webbed feet shifting restlessly in the dirt. "I'm ready for the wastes." Aramis glances at his companions, his expression still guarded, but a flicker of determination crosses his face. "We leave at dawn," he says, his voice firm, brooking no argument. "The wastes are dangerous, but we have no choice. Torin's life depends on us." The party returns to the rusty tankard to rest for the night. The villagers watching them go, their faces a mix of hope and fear, their whispered prayers following the group like a shadow. Inside the tavern, the figure with crimson skin and curved horns continues to strum their lute. Their presence a subtle note in the tavern's gloom, their golden eyes watching the party with quiet interest but offering no approach.